Hello and welcome to the latest episode of, I'm going to say of the podcast, because it's not just the Talking Tradesman today. In the studio with me, I've got Rob from the MYH Podcast. We have come together in collaboration for today's episode to talk about both of us, talk about Rob's journey, what he does, what I do, and yeah, try and spread the message between both audiences, I guess, mate.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we've been messaging back and forth now for a good few months, and I had a bit of time. I'm like, right, let's make this work, and I've done it.
Yeah, man, absolutely. I'm over the moon to have you here today, mate, because it's one of those, like, obviously the mental health space, it's not a competitive thing to me. And I'll message you, I think, when I first started this up and said, oh, I've come across your account. I think it's great. I didn't realise that you were there beforehand. But to me, the more people, the more voices that are talking about this, the better. You know, if there were 50 mental health in construction podcasts out there, then it's a win to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, like, we could stand and do an episode or stand and do a talk or speak to people, and we could say exactly the same things, but you say it in your way and I say it in my way, and some of the audience might resonate, go, oh, I get what Rob's saying, or the other half of the audience, oh, I get how Russ is saying it. Do you know what I mean? So it's different ways of saying the same thing, and ultimately, I think ultimately we've got the shared goal of just trying to help and support the industry.
Exactly that, mate. Yeah, no, it's really well said. I've found that with the episodes that I've done today, in that different episodes, it's as stupid as somebody's accent. People just go, oh, he sounds like me. So then, they tune in a little bit more, whereas somebody from up north might listen to somebody with a Cockney accent and go, oh, I can't get on with that. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
so
exactly. Yeah.
It does, mate. As you quite rightly said, I could be saying exactly the same thing as you, but people just tune into different people. So it needs more people in the space, mate. But I'll take the opportunity to say a massive thank you to you for all the work that you've been doing, mate, 'cause you've been going a lot longer than me. And it's commendable, man. It's giving up your time and energy to try and help people, essentially.
Well, thank you, appreciate that. It means a lot coming from somebody else that's in the similar space, and it really is appreciated. So thank you very much.
No, you're more than welcome, mate. But one thing I do want to have a chat with you about, because obviously potentially my audience, I haven't spoken about this yet because I don't know a lot about it, is the work you do with Lighthouse and everything that has to offer, mate. So if we can have a chat about that.
So in a nutshell, basically, the Lighthouse was set up in 1956 by a couple of bricklayers up in the northeast of England. They unfortunately lost a work colleague to an accident on site, and it was sort of set up as like a bit of a benevolent fund, and they wanted to help and support that worker's family moving forward, and it's now grown into the charity that it is today, and it supports thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of construction workers and the families every single week with the physical, financial and mental well-being, no matter what that looks like, whether you are struggling to pay your bills because of being late getting paid, or you're just in a financial situation that you need a bit of help and support with. Not only can they help and support you with that, but they can also help build you back up to where you need to be. Or if you need a bit of therapeutic support, whether it be a bit of stuff for stress, anxiety, eating stuff, wanting to quit smoking, wanting help with drugs and alcohol support, or anything like that, they can do all that. Or whether it's a bit of physical stuff, you might have chronic pain and you can't get to see a physio, but you need a bit of support, or you don't know how to do it, and you get nowhere with the doctor. They can help and support you with that. But it's not only for you as the tradesperson, it's for your immediate family as well. So your kids and your partner, they might need a bit of help and support. It's all the same stuff, and it's all available to them. It's absolutely free to apply for. It's not a one-time deal. You can use it over and over and over again. You might ring up one week and say that you're struggling financially because of X, Y, and Z. They can help and support you with that. You might ring up in 6 months' time and say that you feel like you need a bit of therapeutic support, not a problem. Or you might ring up in 3 years' time and say that you've got a chronic back pain and you need support and how to do that. Or you might want a bit of help with looking at sorting out pensions, or you might want a bit of help with supporting how to look after yourself, like saving up for a mortgage or something like that, knowing how to do it and what the processes are of it. All these sort of things are out there that the charity does and gives to the industry for free. It's all funded by the industry. So we have company sponsors, we have people that donate, we have people go out and do challenges for us, we have people that will every year he'll donate £250, and that money can go to help support somebody pay for counselling sessions for people, and it all goes into a pot to help and support the industry from the industry. And the charity literally couldn't do any of the work that it does without the help and support of the industry, because it's a big task, but they're doing the work they can because of the support that they're receiving off the industry.
It's an amazing thing, mate. I'll admit, until I sort of threw myself into this whole space, I didn't know anything. And I've been in the building trades all my life. And I've run my business 23, 24 years now. I hadn't heard of or didn't know what Lighthouse was up until getting into this.
Yeah.
And I think one of the differences between me and you and our backgrounds is, from what I gather, you've had more of a big site background, and I've been very much more small business, self-employed, that kind of circle, I guess. And I think maybe if you're on site, you'll have seen the Lighthouse vans and the posters and the Make It Visible campaign. You're probably a little less likely to have seen that if you're a one-man band, because you're working in domestic houses and your customers not, Mr. Smith doesn't have a Lighthouse poster up in his kitchen for you when you go in.
No, you're absolutely right. Yeah, it is quite prevalent out on the sites. The reason why the vans, the colours that it is to draw people's attention into it, and because the Make It Visible campaign, it will be 3 years old in January, and we try and target the smaller domestic stuff through builders, merchants and stuff like that, try and get hold of them through the social media side. But you're absolutely right. It is a difficult market to get into, because sometimes it's Jeff, who's 55 years old, doesn't go on social media, doesn't do anything like that, but he might need a bit of support with pensions, for instance, something like that. If he didn't know it was out there, he wouldn't know to access it through that way. So that's why we try and go through as many channels as we can to get
that. Massively valuable, mate. One of the things that I ask a lot of my guests on the podcast, I'll try and ask when I remember to ask the question, is why they, as an individual, think that the construction industry is so adversely affected when it comes to mental health and the crisis and the horrible high statistics for male suicide. And one of the things that keeps coming up is working in isolation, being alone for long periods, which again, I think is probably a little bit more symptomatic for the people, small one-man bands, And I've experienced that a lot myself. I can go weeks sometimes. You might be on a job where the customer's at work all day. You turn up in the morning, quick hello, then they're gone. And then you're on your own all day. And I think there is a perception or a feeling from a lot of people in the trade that don't know, that aren't aware of organisations like Lighthouse, that you're on your own. You are out there. So it's great to know that it's there, mate. If anyone's listening to this and is intrigued by what you've just said, what's the first step in terms of getting
the first step? If they want to go and have a look and see what's available to them, they can absolutely go on the website. They can go on lighthouse.org. It's lighthouse.org. I can remember. Everybody wants to say not co.uk. Lighthouseclub.org it is. And they can, if they see the vans out and about, scan the QR codes on them, or they can find them on social media. They're on social media. We are Lighthouse Charity. And they can always ring the helpline and just have a chat with them, because the helpline staff are always more than happy to sit and explain what's available to them, how to access it, what they need to do, and where they can do things like that. Because also you can go on the website and have a look at things called beacons. So beacons are like local support groups. So they are, it could be walking and talking groups, it could be a bit of substance abuse groups and things like that. And you go on, it's just a Google map, you zoom in where you live, and they'll have a flag that pops up.
That's cool.
And it says, this is on Tuesday night at this location, you can access it through this. There never is any cost to it, but if there is a cost to it, the charity can help and support you with that side of things as well. So there's tons of stuff on there to have a look. I tell you what is a big thing that they've totally revamped at the minute, and they're constantly building on it, is e-learning. So you can go on the website, and if you want help with a bit of budget planning, there's courses that you can do on there, and it sort of all flows through. It's all like video orientated and click through stuff, so you can't progress till you get this certain section done, and there's no time limit on it. Or you might want to do a bit of mindfulness training and things like that. So it's all available to you on there to access free 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
That's really good, mate. It's the whole thing. It's just nice to know that there's some kind of organisation there to support people in the trades.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
If you have heard this and you're struggling in any of the ways that Rob's already mentioned, but obviously financially, mentally, or even just want a bit of advice, then look up the Lighthouse Club. It is Lighthouse Club,
yeah,
isn't
lighthouseclub.org.
it? Yeah,
definitely.
Lighthouse Club.
We got there in the end.
So yeah, look these guys up, and obviously I will put all the details for the Lighthouse and the links and all that in the episode description. So if you're listening to this now, just scroll down; it'll be down there somewhere, along with how to get hold of Rob, and go check out their services if you think that it might be a benefit to you.
Yeah, or if you think of a different way of getting the message out there that you think has been missed, or it could be done a little bit better, we're always happy to listen to stuff like that.
No, it's great, mate. It's brilliant. It's a fantastic organisation, and I'm glad you've come and sort of spoken a bit about it, because I didn't know a fat lot.
Yeah, and you're not alone in that. Most of the industry are like, "What? You've been around since 1956?"
Yeah, it did surprise me a bit there.
Yeah, and people think that, oh, you've only supported so many people. Honestly, Ross, it's thousands of construction workers. I think one of the big, like we were going on about the people that you speak to when they realise they need a bit of help and support, they think they're alone in it. They also think they're alone in the crisis, or they think they're alone in whatever they're going through.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the work that I do now, whether it be the bits with the podcast or whether it be the bits with the Lighthouse, I want to let people know that they're not the only one feeling like this. And that's why I'll put out things on stories and put posts up to say, look, I'm feeling like this right now. And I've got all these years of experience in this industry, and I feel like I'm pretty balanced with everything. And I feel like, not that anybody has all the ducks in a line, but sometimes things get off skew and you don't know how to handle it. And sometimes you can feel you're the only one that's going through this. And that can make you feel stupid, because a lot of the time I felt stupid that I'm feeling like this. I should be able to handle myself. I should be able to work through this thoughts and feelings. And I don't understand why I'm feeling like this, but I'll ignore it because John down the road's got something worse going on in his life. And I should be able to do this. I should be able to work through it, but I just can't. And I'm the only one that's being like this, and I'm just being daft. I can guarantee, no matter what you're feeling, no matter what's going on in your life, you are not the only one that's been there. You're not the only one that's feeling like that. And that's why I try and do the work that I do, to let people know that there is other people out there.
I've seen how honest you are on your socials, mate. And again, it's something else that it takes balls to do that and put yourself out there and be vulnerable. So again, massive credit to you for doing that, because it will help. It definitely will help people. And I think it comes down to that realization, doesn't it, that everybody has mental health, and that it doesn't matter who you are. My only personal deduction to people that struggle or get to point of crisis, it's very rarely one thing. It's very rarely I was A1 fine and then this one thing happened. It's normally life throws combos at you, and I've, like me personally, a month ago, probably a month ago, I had a really shit couple of months basically, and it was just one thing after another, big blow after big blow after big blow. And me, like what you just said, I consider myself quite level, quite grounded, and quite reflective in myself. So it takes quite a lot to get to me. But I was at a stage where I was thinking, I've just fucking, not that I've had enough in terms of I'm thinking about taking my own life, but I've just had enough of this shit. And really fed up, really down, and all the stuff that comes along with it, struggle sleeping. And then it mounts up to the point where, when you are doing things like struggling to sleep and all that, then the little things get to you, the flat tire. It's those tiny things that can be the straw that broke the camel's back.
And you can start to think, why me? It's always happening to me. It just keeps going on, and it just feels like it's mounting and getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And I think people sometimes don't realise that they're in that moment, where things are going on. And like when I first started to sort of realise that I needed a bit of help and support with my mental health around about 2017, something like that, I didn't realise I was as bad as I was, because I thought that's what life is.
Yeah.
You get up, you go to work, earn your money, you pay your bills, you go again. I was struggling on so many different levels. I was struggling with stuff at home with the kids side of things. I was struggling with stuff in work. Like you touched on before, that my background is brickwork, but it's big commercial stuff. So your football grounds and hospitals, prisons, MOD bases, all that sort of stuff. I worked in that tier 1 contracting world for a long time, and I struggled massively with confidence. Like when I do the talks that I do now, I'll stand in front of people and go, right, I've got a massive problem. Like, what? Like confidence. And they're like, yeah, but you stood in front of talking. I'm like, I'm fine with that side of things. It's what goes on in here and what goes on in here.
Yeah.
This is where I struggle with the confidence side of things. I never ever think I'm good enough. I never think I'm meant to be the person doing this, whether it's the work that I do today or whether it's running and being part of big project teams that I used to be part of. I never thought I was good enough, and it used to eat away at me. And it was like imposter syndrome or inner saboteur. I was like, I'm not good enough for this, and I can't do this, and I was second guessing myself with everything that goes on. And it used to totally and utterly control my life, but I never realised. And it wasn't until I had a realisation and a shock that I was like, because I had a huge breakdown one weekend. I'd been away and I just lost it with one of the kids. I absolutely lost it with him. But I still got up on Monday morning and went to work, because that's what we do, don't we?
Yeah,
We just keep going.
Yeah.
And it was that realisation of, right, something needs to change here, and I need to do something about it. And that's when I started doing a bit more about it, and I got some support. And it took me a long time to accept it, and it took me a long time to lean into the help and support that's out there. And then when I did lean into that help and support, I started to realise that this is making me feel better. And this is allowing me to come back to be me, and it's allowing me to do my work that I need to do, which was at the time, I was a project manager at the time.
Yeah.
And it's allowing me to focus. I'm more productive. I'm getting better and feeling better in myself. Life's starting to change and life's starting to get better. And all those little problems that I used to think that why me all the time is, right, all right, let's sort it. It's a pain in the backside, but I can deal with it and I can work through it. And it took me a long time to realise that, and it took me a long time to accept it.
I think I've been on a similar path, mate, to be honest with you, just absorbing what you were saying there. Same thing. I think I went through big periods of my life where, in fact, I've openly said this, up until I went through my divorce, I was completely ignorant to mental health. I'd have been the lad that turned around and said, I don't have it, mate. Ain't got it. Don't affect me. You know, I'm perfectly sound. And then went through a stressful period in my life, the divorce and going through court with the kids and stuff like that. It was a 2-year period in my life where I went through stress and anxiety that I'd never experienced before, and then actually recognised that I was suffering with stress and anxiety. And that was the whole beginning of the journey for me. Like the whole mental health probably started close to 10 years ago now.
Yeah.
Me personally, I mean, I've never been to therapy. I would love to go, actually, but as per normal, it's like, you know, time and money and all the rest of it. But I think it'd be really interesting. But what I did was I threw myself into education.
Yeah.
So I focused on, I became fascinated with the physical manifestation of stress, my thoughts. And once I broke it down to, you know, essentially when I went through my divorce, I went through a stage where I was highly stressed and I was suffering with anxiety and probably a couple of borderline panic attacks. Had no idea that that's what it was at the time, like zero idea. And it was I met my wife later on, and she recognised it in me because I was kind of, stupid things, Rob, like my phone would go off and straight away my heart rate would go up because I'm thinking, who's that? What's that? It's going to be some shit, you know, some drama to deal with. And it was her talking to me and saying, like, you feeling like this? You feel? And she's like, look, you're suffering with anxiety. I'm like, no, I'm not. And I pushed back. I rejected it all to begin with. And then eventually sort of started thinking, well, the physical symptoms like, you know, not sleeping, bad skin, you know, having an upset stomach, stuff like that. And I thought that's actually fascinating that the power of my mind can cause an upset stomach. And then the whole yin and yang scales thing came into play where I thought, well, if the negative is true, then the positive must be too.
Yeah.
So then I started studying psychology, philosophy, all sorts, to educate myself on why and essentially to begin with the power of the mind then how to harness it, control it, and
Yeah.
and that was the start of my whole journey. But up until that point, I did not recognize mental health. But looking back now with today's eyes, I can look at a lot of my behavior. And we were talking about this pre-record where I was saying about the period in my life where I worked as a bailiff. And I now see that as a form of self-harm, because I used to put myself I don't know whether it was deliberately. I guess to a degree it was because of the
It
job.
might have been subconsciously, deliberately.
Yeah. In fact, when I think back, there was definitely times where it was deliberate. I would put myself in harm's way and almost to be like, see what happens.
Yeah.
You know, I look back now, a lot of my behaviour then, again, I would sit here now and say to you, I've never had a problem with drink. But when I look back at some of the years in my mid-20s, late 20s, it was drink to oblivion or not at all. You know, I was typical work hard Monday to Friday. Saturday night I didn't have a weekend if I wasn't going and getting absolutely obliterated. Can't remember, can't stand up, steaming drunk. That was a absolute necessity for it to be a weekend.
You know, for me, like the drinking side of things it's a fear for me to get like that, because I think it's a control thing for me, that I don't like to be out because of control. And like, I've never ever done any drugs. And people say to me, you work in the construction industry, you've never touched a drug in your life. I'm like, no, I haven't. And they're like, why? I went, because I don't want to be out of control. And I think that plays into the whole mindset that I need to know what I'm doing, so I can be seen to know what I'm doing, and people aren't going to think I'm blagging my way, even just in general life.
So it comes back to the whole imposter syndrome type thing.
And it played a massive part in me. And even today, like when I was going through low periods, I definitely drank more than I would, but I wouldn't drink to get drunk. Lee, who's part of the Make It Visible team with us, he's teetotal now. He's sober now because...
Yeah, I speak to Lee. Lee's great. Yeah, big shout out to Lee.
Yeah, he's mint. And I found it difficult to understand at first when we started when he started talking about his drinking journey, because he said he'd be like that. He couldn't just go to the pub and have one drink.
That was me. Yeah,
he'd go out and get absolutely mortaled all the time. And I'm like, yeah, but I drink alcohol because I enjoy the taste of the beer. And he's totally took it out of his life now because he doesn't want the temptation and things like that. And I found that hard to understand for a long time because, like I said, even at my lowest point, I'd probably drink more than I usually would, but it'd be no more than maybe 3 or 4 cans a night, but I'd be doing it every night.
Yeah.
And even now, when I go out now, it's very rarely that I'll go more than, say on a night out, I'll go more than 4 or 5 pints. And again, I think it's still that subconscious control thing that I have. I don't want to let go.
Yeah.
I don't want to be out of control. And I don't want to not know what's going on around me. And I think that a big part of it for me was like that, because I feel like I think I carry a huge weight of responsibility on myself and others around me, and I struggle to let go of that. And I've had 15, 20 sessions of therapy now. And a lot of the therapy for me helped me realize that I don't know how to explain it, that the therapy worked for me because it helped me realize that what I was going through and how I was feeling was not because of the things that I thought it was. And they helped me understand that things have gone on in my life and it's had a detrimental effect to me further down the line. Like, I carry things through from childhood. And I always say to people, and it's true, I've had a very good childhood. Both parents were together. Dad worked, mum stayed at home and looked after us. Lived in a nice area, never had any trouble or anything like that. But then there was a few things they said to me and I was like, oh, right, well, maybe that's what's led to this side of things. Like, I'm really, really bad for just getting on with it, dealing with the situation. And I think that's why when I was working on the projects, I progressed because I could be left to just get on with the job. And if there was a problem there, I'd solve it. I'm a problem solver. And I think a lot of that's come from being younger, that I just got on with stuff when I was younger, and I've carried that into my adult life. And you look back at school reports, and the school reports say, Rob's really good, but he doesn't apply himself, he's lazy. And I never wanted people to think I was lazy.
Mm.
So I overworked and I overemphasized stuff and I overdeveloped it and I went to the extreme of doing too much and working too hard and turning myself inside out and being my own worst enemy. I am my own harshest critic.
Yeah.
And I struggle to see good in the work that I do, whether it's the bricklaying side of things or even the work that I do now. I'm like, I don't know whether I'm doing this right. And I don't know whether, and again, it all plays back into the imposter syndrome side of things. But these are things that you have to juggle all the time and work through it a lot of the time.
I think you've made a really valid point there, mate, in that the things that you deal with in life, and I've got the same, I've got things and events from my childhood that I know affect my way of thinking now, but I now know what they are. Yeah. So I didn't before. Up until I was in my early 30s, I was kind of like the puppet on the strings. Yeah. So all the input, the ingredients that made me were pulling the strings. Now I've looked up and seen the strings and I can see how they work. Now, if I'm in certain situations or things are said to me or done or whatever, I can recognise my own reaction and think, step back a little bit. Yeah. You're feeling that way, not because of this, not because of today, but probably because of what happened when you were 10, which is mad. And it's that cliche thing, isn't it, when you talk about psychology and everyone goes, it's because, this happened as a kid, but there's truth to it. There really is. It's been a really fascinating journey for me studying psychology because it ticked so many boxes and put on so many light bulbs for me. Yeah. I was like, okay, I get it. I get it. So I'd recommend it to anyone. If you're going to pick up a hobby, study a bit of psychology, just basic psychology. You don't have to go degree level, but I think it's really, really beneficial just to have a baseline.
Massively. I think it's fascinating that what the power of the mind can do and things like that can be. You might at the time think it's something in like it was nothing. It's such a small thing, but then it builds to a massive thing when you're older, and how powerful words are as well.
Oh, huge! Yeah.
And like I can still vividly remember that secondary school teacher, and I've been out of school now 25 years, saying to me in year 8, whatever it might have been. So it was 30 years ago, saying, "Yeah, Rob's lazy."
Yeah, and yet you still hold that.
And I still hold that inside. Yeah. And it wasn't said to me to be bad. They were just explaining to me, "You're lazy, Rob." And that stuck with me, like really stuck with me. And I still struggle with that today. I don't like people in the charity, in the lighthouse say, "Stop. You're not, you don't have to do this. You don't have to turn yourself inside out." But it's me pushing myself harder and harder and harder and harder and harder and harder all the time. And I'll be honest with you, Russ, at the beginning of August, I was out doing something and I'm like, I don't want to be in this situation. And I took myself out of the situation. And then I was like, why have I done that? Nothing beats me. And I don't mean it in an arrogant way that nothing beats me, but it's that voice inside me that goes, you can do this, you can keep going. You're not lazy, and all that side of things. And I let it beat me, and it's taken me 3 weeks to get over that. Yeah. It was just a bit of training that I didn't want to do. And I couldn't quieten my mind at the time. Like I usually, all my coping strategies weren't working. Yeah. My mind was firing and I was like, I went into fight and flight and I was like, I got to run. Yeah. And I got to get out of it. And I hated myself for that. I hated myself for that I'd done that. But it was the right decision. My body, like you say, the body holds the score. Yeah. My body did the right decision to get me out of there. But I've had to, for the past 3 weeks, calm myself down and work through that and talk myself round that I did make the right choice and I hadn't failed. I wasn't a failure because I'd done that, because I still feel that pressure that I'm going to fail at life and I'm going to do this and I'm not good enough. And again, it all comes down to the confidence.
This is what it seems with you, though, because you've gone on the journey that you've gone on and you've got, I guess, a bit more understanding and knowledge on yourself. You're able to step away, look at that, even if it took you 3 weeks, you got there. And that's one of the things where other people will struggle, people who are less aware of their triggers and their life input, that would just sit with the I'm a failure and would not move past that. It's an interesting thing because I've had this conversation quite a few times with people where there is a degree And it's not, there's no sort of victim shaming element to it, but there's a degree of whatever makes us who we are, there is a certain responsibility that we hold to ourselves to explore and learn and better ourselves in terms of like what you've done, the journey you've been on, the journey I've been on. Like we're not in control of the things that happen to us, only our reaction to those things. If you allow what happens to you to control you and become you, that's where the problem to me lies, when people sit in the victim sort of mindset.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I get people all the time when I'm out doing the talks on site, they're like, I'm stuck in, I can't seem to get past it, and they'll come up with hundreds of excuses going around. I'm like, when are you going to stop being a victim?
Yeah.
I'm like, what do you mean? Because I'm quite harsh with them at times.
Yeah.
I'm like, when are you going to stop being a victim and start moving out of that space?
Exactly.
And like, they're like, I never thought about it that way. It's like, if you sit there and sit in rubbish thoughts all the time and you've got all that going round and this always happens to me and this is my fault, you're the common denominator there. So why don't you change something about you? Take a step back and have a look at it at a different angle. And I'll try and relate it to work, whatever trade they are. It might be a painter and decorator like yourself, and they're like, this always happens to me. And I'm like, right, if you've come in to paint this room here and you know that this certain wall finish, the plaster, if you don't prep that wall beforehand, it's all going to peel off or it's all going to flake off.
You keep doing it.
And then you keep doing it. Do you know what I mean? And I'll make it relevant to them that way a lot of the time. Like I did it last week with somebody and they were like, yeah, but I need to do all this. I'm like, right, can you carry one brick? I'm like, yeah, I can carry one brick. Can you carry 10 bricks? I'm like, and they were like, yeah. I'm like, it's getting heavier, isn't it? They're like, yeah. I was like, can you carry a full pack of bricks? And they're like, well, no. I'm like, so why are you carrying all these problems on top of you now? I was encouraging him to reach out for a bit of therapeutic support.
Yeah.
And I said to him, if you're carrying the weight of all this stuff that you've got going on in your life, how do you expect everything else in your world around you to just be okay and normal when you're scatty and everywhere with everything that's going on? He was like, you know what, I get it now.
Yeah.
I get that actually. Now you've said it like that.
It's funny, isn't it? The analogies I find really help. Because I've found this talking about mental health where people don't understand it, and then you'll come up with an analogy, and some of my guests have come up with some crackers, and then it's like people go, I get it now. I get what you mean. And you've mentioned weight a couple of times, and one of the analogies around like emotional weight that I heard and I loved and I've repeated is to liken sort of like an emotion to holding a pint of water.
Yeah.
So it can be something really small and that sort of thing where if you say to somebody, can you hold a pint of water? Hold a pint of water in your hand and hold it out. Can you do it? And everyone's going, yeah, of course. No problem. Can you do it for half an hour?
Yeah.
Maybe, I don't know. Like, can you hold a pint of water in your hand out for 6 hours? Probably not. What you got to do, you got to put it down. But after you've put it down, you can pick it up again.
Yeah.
And that's the same as emotions, isn't it? And that's why the importance of talking, because talking allows you to put that emotion down for a bit.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you could talk to me about something that's happened to you. I can't fix it. I can't take it off you. You're not passing it on to me.
Yeah.
It's still yours. The glass of water is still yours, but you've just put it down for a bit.
Yeah.
And then when you pick it up again later, you can. It doesn't break you.
Yeah.
And that's why the importance of talking and, you know, having a bit of self-reflection and, like we just mentioned, the importance of responsibility to actually... I'm a big advocate of it's okay to feel things.
Yeah.
You know, bad things happen to you. Absolutely feel it, process it. But there comes a point where you have to go, okay, I'm going to move now. I've took the shit. I've mourned. I've been angry, whatever it might be. Now I've got to move. I can't just stay in this spot. There's no time limit to it, depending on what happens. I mean, people go through some horrific things. And, you know, I'm not anyone to turn around and say, well, you should take a week or you should take 3 weeks, whatever. But if you reach the point where you're not happy and you're clinging on to that one thing that's happened, has to come a point where you go, I'm going to do something.
Yeah.
Whether that's talking, getting therapy, going for a run, going for a walk, whatever, you have to move in one way, whether it's metaphorically or whether it's actually physically, get up and move.
Yeah.
You know, and taking on that responsibility, each and every one of us, of knowing that shit happens. At some point, you have to decide, I'm going to get out of this now. I'm going to try and improve it. And generally speaking, trying, just taking that first step, it puts you on that path.
Yeah.
It could be a fucking long road.
Yeah.
But you've got to start walking.
Exactly. It's like any job. You might walk in on a project and you might have 600 bedrooms to go and decorate, and you think, Jesus Christ, I've got 600. But if you just chip away at them before you know it,
you got to start the first one.
And keep going with it. And I think, going back to the point, like you said, like therapy, I think one of the biggest things, or one of the many things that I did take out of therapy, is learning to be content. So I said, yeah, but I should be happy all the time. And the therapist said to me, like, well, if you want to be happy all the time, it'll just become a numb emotion, because you won't feel anything else. And if you're happy all the time, it doesn't give you that same kick anymore. And so when you do, or certainly now when I do have periods, like I was talking about when I was at that training a couple of weeks ago, that was the past few weeks have been a low time for me. But these low times make me really appreciate the good times. I'm learning to find that baseline that works for me. And you might be in a situation, you could have been in that training room with me and you go, what's so bad about this training? It doesn't matter. And that's because we're all individuals and we have all individual needs. And your baseline might be here, my baseline might be there. And you might be able to put up with stuff that I can or I can't, and vice versa. And we're all different. And things take time, exactly like you say. There's no, oh yeah, you're going to go and do 6 sessions of therapy and you're going to be healed. No, it doesn't work like that. You'll go to therapy and they'll help you understand things, or it might not be therapy. You might be going to group stuff that might work for you, or you might join a rugby club, or you might join a football club, or whatever it is. Do whatever works for you to help, like you say, help you move forward. Because if you stick in that same environment, whether it be a victim mode or whether it be stuck feeling sorry for yourself all the time, because I felt sorry for myself a lot.
Yeah.
I should be better than this, and woe is me. And a lot of the time I have to pull my own socks up and get on with it, because I think the big thing for me, I have like certain thought patterns, and I'll say, my mind's taking me to these horrible places, but it can also bring me back. These horrible places.
That's what I said before, the balance. The scales, if it can do the bad, it can do the good as well.
Yeah. And people have to realise that life throws us stuff that is hard, and you've got to allow yourself to feel it. Like you say, you're absolutely right. You've got to feel that emotion, but then you've got to work through it.
Yeah.
And you've got to keep going forward. It's so important to keep moving forward. And that forward might not look the same way as it did before whatever went on. Your path might be like this, and then something happens in your life, and then it might move over it, and then it'll be going forward again, but it doesn't look like that same path. But you've got to learn to adapt, overcome. I mean, working in the construction industry, I think we're full of problem solvers. How many times have you gone into work and like we spoke about before, you thought you were going to get in that office and it's going to be plain sailing, just get in and get the walls done. But you're like, oh no, the team's working.
Oh, literally, I've had it. I mean, for example, today, so we started a job and we've got a sales office to do. And they've currently got dark grey ceilings that they want white. And there must be 40 people working in there, all computer stations. And I sort of said to the MD, I'm like, so how are we painting them then? He's basically said, look, it's a sales office, so can't disturb people. They're on the phones. They can't move. I'm like, well, I can't paint over their heads. And he sort of looked at me like, really?
Yeah.
No, I absolutely can't. So hence why now, 5 a.m. tomorrow morning, I'm getting up and we're starting at 6 a.m. tomorrow to get 3 hours working before the sales team come in at 9. So there's your problem. There's your solution.
Yeah. And I think it's very much the same when it comes to mental health. You have a problem and you have to work through it. And a lot of the time you have people around you that'll help you and support you with it, whether it be your friends, whether it be your family, whether it be somebody in work, whether it be messaging somebody like ourselves, or whether it be a therapist or a professional helping you and supporting you. But ultimately, you're the person that has to work through that stuff.
You've got to take that step, haven't you? That doesn't mean that you can't ask for support. That doesn't mean that you can't say, look, I want to improve that. Help me.
Yeah.
There's absolutely nothing wrong with that, but you've got to want to move.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, and I'm not saying this to sort of single anybody out, but there is a proportion of the population that take their trauma and let it become part of their identity.
Yeah, massively.
And get frozen in that. And it's almost like they don't really want to move on, because without that trauma, they worry about who they are.
Yeah.
It becomes such a big part of their life that without it, they don't know how to be happy, or how to be free of the trauma that has affected them. And it's a really sad thing to see. But I don't know, how do you even go about telling somebody that?
That can be quite brutal with people.
Well, yeah, it sounds like they need to speak to you, Rob, to be fair. But
it is a massive point that I think people do get stuck with, but that's who I am. No, you've got anxiety.
Yeah.
It's not, it's part of you. It's not who you are.
Yeah.
It's just something that goes on in your life.
Identity, mate, is something that fascinates me. When I studied psychology, it was a subject that I really delved into, because I find identity fascinating, because identity is fluid. It changes. And one of the best examples of that is parenthood.
Yeah.
So you go from being, Rob, the married man, or whatever. I'm not going to judge on whether you were married or not married when you had your kids, but you go from Rob with a partner, and then overnight you're Rob the dad.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I mean, as you know, becoming a parent, that then probably takes up, if you're on a pie chart of identity, becoming a dad, parent, mother, whatever, that takes up like probably 3/4 of the pie all of a sudden, virtually overnight. And that's what I find interesting about identity, is the fluidity of it. Things happen in your life, and then the reverse happens. I'm not there yet, but I'm approaching that, say, with my son. He's 17. So all of a sudden I go from having a dependent child to now somebody who's got his own identity. He's making his own moves in life. And speaking bluntly, he don't need me as much as he used to. So then all of a sudden I've got to find myself again.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, that big part of my identity now it's reducing on the pie chart, as it were, in terms of time and stuff like that. And then you got to fill it again. So I find it fascinating.
You can think of it as phases of the job.
Yeah.
So you come in, you start the job, and you've got to rub all the walls down, and you've got to take off all the old paper and all the bad. That's one phase. Then you're coming in, so that could be your childhood, and then you've got to come in, and then you've got to do all the prep. It's another phase. That could be adolescence moving into adulthood. And then you could get you're so busy focused on getting the room painted and everything like that, and that could be the time with kids and marriage and everything like that, and progressing through life. And then you come to the end where you think, right, I've only got to go back and do the snagging, and that could be the period that you're coming up to now, where you still got to do a bit of work, but you don't have to do as much work as you used to.
There's always going to be a bit to do, obviously, but I'm now at that period. I found introspective, like looking at my own life, I've had this journey that I've gone on, because I split up with my ex-partner when my son was 8, and she moved down to Devon, so from here about 200 miles away. So I went from being a full-time dad to being a part-time dad. Didn't ever want to be a part-time dad, but it was on me, and I had to process, and that was a whole journey in itself, because I had to come to terms with being part-time, because I only had my kids every other weekend and some holidays and stuff like that. Because of the distance, I couldn't have them on a Tuesday or Thursday for dinner. It just wasn't feasible. So it was every other weekend and holidays. And there was a big guilt attached to that. Then I went through the process of sort of adjusting to my new life, my new identity, as it were. And then I felt guilty that I'd adjusted. So I was like, I shouldn't be happy with this, but I'm kind of getting used to it. So I'd almost start to enjoy my life as I'd created the new life, and then feel guilty I was enjoying it.
Yeah.
And then a couple of years ago, then my son moved back in with me. So I kind of went through adjusting to being part-time, just about getting used to it, and then he's back.
Yeah.
So then I'm full-time again. And now he's getting older, and it's a head fog. Do you know what I mean? But this is life, isn't it? Yeah. It's ever evolving, and it can take a turn in a day. It's fascinating. I find it fascinating, but I know for a lot of people, it's where people get stuck.
Yeah, and you're making a good point there. It could change in a day. I go and do these talks now, and if you speak to any of the Make It Visible tour members, they'll tell you exactly the same story, that We get people like, and they turn up there. I don't fucking need this mental health bullshit. It's a load of bollocks. You're teaching everybody to be snowflakes and all that sort of stuff. Because we get heckled and abused all the time. Well, they try and abuse us, but they get it back off us.
Yeah.
And I say to people, right, that's fine. I said, but how do you know you're not going to get a phone call tomorrow that totally devastates your world? Like, well, I don't. Like, well, at least you know there's people out there now that can support you.
Yeah.
And then I was in London on. It used to be the American Embassy. It's been turned into this 6-star hotel. Spending horrendous money on it. But I had this guy heckling us all the way through the talk. Bollocks, shit, all the usual stuff. Like, whatever, bore off, mate. And then I ended up stopping halfway through and going, mate, I'm clearly triggering you here. Do you need some support? Because we work in teams in case anything happens like that.
Yeah.
And Lee went over and spoke to him, and he was like, no, I don't need any of this. So at the end of it, I went over and had a chat with him, like, look, mate, what's going on? You clearly got stuff. No, I don't have stress. I don't have anxiety. And he had an Arsenal top on. And I went, football fan? He's like, yeah. I was like, so when you're watching the football, right, and you Arsenal get a penalty and you're losing 1-0 to United because you hate Man United. He's like, yeah. Oh, you're drawing 1-1. You get a penalty in the 90th minute and to go 2-1 up. And you know United ain't going to come back from that in the 90th minute. They don't get Fergie time anymore. He's like, yeah. And the player puts it on the centre spot and you're like, you got to score, you got to score, you got to score, you got to score, you got to get this in. I need you to score this. I need you to get this. And he's like, yeah. I said, have you ever felt that? And like, you can feel it building in your stomach. He's like, yeah. I went, that's anxiety. And he went, no, it's not. Here it is. Yeah. And I said, all right. And then he takes the penalty and he misses and you start swearing and you don't know why and you're angry and you have all these feelings inside you and you just want to scream, shout and swear all at the same time. It's like, yeah. I went, that's depression. He went, no, it's not. I said, yeah, it is. I said, you feel sad because they've not done it and you're feeling that this sort of way and you don't understand why and you've got all these emotions running around you don't know how to handle it. And he was like, maybe. It clicks in their head. And it's funny that he walked away from at the end of it going, maybe I do have this stuff that goes on in my life.
It's that moment, mate, isn't it? I think, again, one of the biggest deductions I've come to the obstacle why people don't want to accept that they have mental health is because we don't talk about it enough. Yeah. People don't understand it. The knowledge isn't there. And that's all it comes down to, really, is knowledge. But people confuse mental health with mental illness.
Yeah.
And that's the big issue, is people think that they say, yes, if I have mental health, that means that they're ill. But no, mental health is health.
Yeah.
I read a quote. I was sent a quote by a former guest, Matt Willis. Big shout out to you. And he screenshot. He was reading a book. I can't remember what the book was about, to be fair, but there was a quote. I'm sure it was like Ruby Wax or somebody that had actually. And the quote went, I'm sorry if I'm butchering this, but along the lines of, we will only know when mental health has been sort of fully accepted when we no longer refer to it as mental health.
Yeah.
We just call it health.
Yeah.
And it encompasses, physical and mental. It's just health.
Yeah.
And it's interesting when you think of it that way, because, as I say, I think the obstacle is it's just lack of understanding. That's all it is.
And the two of them go hand in hand. You mentioned it before, like you were saying when you were going through stuff, your body would be screaming at you.
Yeah,
that there's something wrong and you got constant chronic pain and all that sort of stuff, and your body will let you know one way or the other. Like for me, I know when I'm running down, I'll start to get cold sores for no reason.
Yeah, exactly. You get ill easier,
and all that sort of stuff, and they need to be balanced out. And a lot of people say to me, "Oh, it's a weakness that you're asking for it." I was like, all right. If you go out this weekend, you drink too many Panda Pops, you fall off the curb, you break your ankle. Is there a weakness to go and speak to the doctor about getting your ankle fixed? And they're like, well, no, because you need it. And I went, it's exactly the same. It just because you can't see it and just because you don't understand it, doesn't mean that it's any less of importance that you have to go and get it sorted. It doesn't make you any weaker.
But that's the thing. I'll tell you what is a difference, though, Rob. How many people break their leg and choose to fix it themselves? But how many people's minds break and they then go, I'm all right. I'll just something flying around me here. I'll just shut myself in the room and I'll fix this myself. I'm not going to tell anyone. There's that massive sort of unbalanced element to it. Yeah. Whereas I say with physical health, everyone knows, break my leg, take me to the hospital, get me a doctor. That's fine. But if you have a mental break, don't want to tell anyone about that. What if people think I'm mad? People will get, arms behind my back. I'm going to be in a padded suit and put in a cell. And that's the misconception of mental health, is the fact that mental illness, it does exist. There's people out there that are having full psychosis and psychotic breaks, and there's mental illness. There's proper conditions that need treatment. That isn't mental health. And mental health, everyone has it. Every single person listening to this now, sorry, you have mental health. Every fucking one of you.
Absolutely.
Every one of you. Every person alive on this planet at the moment has mental health. It might be great, might be good. And this is one of the things, they could have good mental health their entire life and then never really acknowledge it's there. But in just the same way that I go through every day not really acknowledging I've got a left arm.
Yeah.
But if I broke it, I would. I'd know all about it if I broke it.
Was it on one of your podcasts that somebody was going on about the nose?
The nose.
So they said, I've seen it somewhere where they said, you've got a nose, but you can't feel it and you don't see it because you don't feel unless you put your eyes on, but you've still got it. Yeah. And they put it to that. And like you saying about your left arm, that just jogged the memory.
I don't think I can take credit for the nose one, but it is the same thing, isn't it? It's there. You don't really acknowledge it until it breaks. And that's one of the things, I guess when I started the podcast, my whole mission statement, as it were, was to raise mental health awareness in construction, because that's where I am. And I went through the whole journey of starting to volunteer at Samaritans, and that was where it twigged for me, because I knew there was an issue in construction, but I just never knew how bad. And I started volunteering at Samaritans, and then I saw the statistics around suicide in general and the fact that more men take their own lives by such vast quantities, 75%. And then it was like, well, I wonder how much out of that comes out of construction. And that was what took me to where I am today. Because again, when taking the phone calls at Samaritans, I spoke to a lot of blokes from the trades.
Yeah.
I'll pull it out within 2-3 minutes of conversation. You talk about their life circumstances or how's work, and then you get into, I'm a brickie or I'm a scaffolder or whatever. And you can just resonate. I can tell people in the trades pretty quickly. And then I started looking into the statistics, which actually quite poignantly this week it's been all over the news about the ONS statistics, hasn't it? I'm sure you've seen them. That we're at a 20-year, but it's actually the highest rate since 1999. So ONS figures are from 2023, but we're close to a 25-year high for suicide in general. It's quite poignant, actually, that you happen to be here with me this week. But that was my journey into the podcast, because through doing that and working with Samaritans, and the work there is fantastic, and it's an experience like no other. I can't really describe it.
What's a typical call like?
There is no typical call.
Right.
Is the answer to that. One of the big misconceptions about Samaritans, I'll put this out. So I think Samaritans are a fantastic service. They're actually a great service, I believe, for people in the trades when they know how it's used. One of the main things and the reasons there is it's completely anonymous. So there's people taking the calls. They don't know who you are. They don't know your phone number. They don't know your location. Call centres are all across the country, so you can take a call from anywhere. But in terms of a typical call, all ends of the scale, mate. The one thing I think that surprised me when I started volunteering there was the sheer volume of mental health calls. In fact, not so much mental health, mental illness calls, people that were really struggling with like full-on psychosis. But because we now have a care in the community model within that that area, a lot of people are left at home, and the NHS are struggling. And quite often NHS mental health crisis teams will give out Samaritans cards and basically go, well, we're 9 till 5. After that, ring these guys. And although the training at Samaritans is brilliant, we're just volunteers. We're not professionals.
It's a listening ear service.
It's a listening service, So we're not there to give advice or tell people what to do. But the calls can range from anything from lonely, had a bad day, right the way through to breaking point crisis, where people are either contemplating or in the process of trying to take their own lives.
Yeah.
And you never know. I've had shifts where I've taken no calls that have been at crisis point, and then I've had shifts where every call is really at crisis point. It's a fantastic service, and as I said, for the construction industry, I know Lighthouse have got a line as well, haven't they?
So they can act as a listening service, but in the same breath, again, they don't give the advice out. They get you to see professional help. So they will get you in front of the professionals.
Okay.
So basically, if somebody rings a helpline number, you'll go through to the helpline. One of the team will answer it. And again, it's totally and utterly anonymous. You don't have to give them anything if you don't want to. If you just want to ring up and speak to somebody, you don't have to give them anything. You can just sit and talk to them. But to move forward, you do need to give contact details because they have to get back in contact with you to arrange support. So you ring up, speak to one of the team, let them know whatever's going on, because I'm sure, like yourself, Russ, you've probably heard some stuff that's gone on in people's lives, and they've heard it all before.
Oh God, yeah.
They can ring up, speak to them. You'll get assigned a caseworker. Your caseworker will support out what support plan you need, and they will be with you throughout your journey while you're with the charity, and then they will arrange anything that you need, whether it be the financial, physical, or mental support that you need. They'll arrange all that with you, and then you'll go off and speak to the professionals that are related to whatever you're getting support with. And again, at any time, you can always come back and speak to your caseworker. Or we get people like on a Friday, Rush, ringing up the helpline at 4:00 on the drive home and go, "What a week I've had! I've had this go on, I've had that go on, and blah blah blah." Let it all go. Right, thanks a lot. I'll see you next week. I'll speak to you next Friday.
Do you know what though, mate? A similar thing at Samaritans. We've had this conversation as volunteers, and I'll make the point now. Sometimes those conversations where it doesn't sound like it's crisis, or it doesn't sound like it's really serious. It might be, but they just need somebody to talk to, and sometimes that can make all the difference, just being on the other end of the phone, even if somebody is ringing to have a little rant. Because I've had it before where I've had conversations that have seemed a little bit not like a waste of time, because there's no such thing as a waste of time with those phone calls, but a little bit like, is this a misuse of service? Because it's a bit more conversational, and then you'll speak to somebody for 20 minutes, and then at the end of the call they'll go, actually, the real reason I called is I've got a plan to end my own life, but I just needed somebody to talk to. I didn't know how to say it. And again, you're talking to a stranger, you don't know how they're going to react, but whoever's taking the call, like you just said, we've heard it all before. There's very few things that we could be told that would shock, but sometimes just talking is enough. There was a great analogy actually that we're told in our training at Samaritans, which is, for a caller, it's like they've got a basket of laundry that's all jumbled up, and throughout the process of a phone call, it's like they're taking that metaphorical basket of laundry, taking an item out, folding it and stacking it. So by the end of the call, they've still got all the same laundry, but it's now ordered, stacked neatly, and they can process it. Whereas before it was a mess, and that's the mind, that's the thought process. And there is a hell of a lot of truth. You can hear it. It's a fascinating thing. You can hear the tone in the person change throughout the conversation. So this really valuable service. Anyone who needs to, it's 116 123 24/7. The reason I think it's applicable so much to people in construction is that anonymity. There's no judgment. There's no... Because again, there's the alpha male, stereotypical building trade lads who would be concerned potentially that they're going to speak to somebody they know, or somebody's going to think little of them for struggling. The great thing about that service is it's just nobody's ever going to know. It can be frustrating as somebody taking the calls sometimes, because you do feel for people and you think, I'd like to know what happened. And you never know. You know, you once somebody hangs up on you or the phone call ends, you never speak to them again. So there's kind of a beauty to that as well.
There is, because I don't know if you've ever had it where people can get quite attached to your support.
Yeah, well, that thankfully, it's interesting you should say that actually. It's one of the reasons I started volunteering at Samaritans was because through studying psychology, you have to take a direction, which is either child psychology, sports psychology, or like counselling and therapy. So I've always lent towards counselling and therapy. So the reason I started with Samaritans was I thought to myself, I don't know how I'm going to react taking on the emotional weight of some of these conversations. But I think, again, the anonymity of it works in reverse. So because you don't see, I think that's another big thing as well, Rob. You don't see the face.
Yeah, it's off
You
face
don't,
conversation.
yeah, exactly. So they're anonymous in image as well. I think that plays a big part. But you do have that complete break where at the end of the phone call, you don't have the emotional weight or responsibility either. Because you can take some distressing calls where people are telling you. The one thing I think with Samaritans, the hardest thing I had to process initially was the fact that it's a listening service and we don't give advice is you have to respect somebody's wishes.
Yeah.
So if they tell you that they've made a plan to end their own life and they're going to go through with it, you're not actually allowed to say, don't do it.
Oh, really?
Really, which can be quite a strange situation. You're not allowed to ask them not to do it, tell them not to do it, or try and talk them out of it. So fortunately for me, touch wood, I've never actually had this, but there are volunteers that have had situations where somebody's called during and just wants to talk to somebody while they do that, which is horrible. But at the same time, it's also a huge privilege to actually be sort of chosen to be in the last moments with somebody, I guess. I don't know how it would make me feel. I haven't been in that position, fortunately.
It wasn't a phone call, but I supported somebody who was taking their own life, and I ended up ending the conversation and doing 999, and they survived.
Oh wow!
They're now in a better place. They've in a different part of their life now, and it was. It's going to get me emotional. It was difficult to deal with, but it's difficult to work through sometimes when you can hear the life going out of somebody.
Yeah.
And it was hard to deal with at the time. And it was a Saturday, and it was somebody who I knew, and I ended up going out in the garage, taking this call and sorting it out. And once I did, because I knew I could do no more for this person, I'd helped him, supported him, done as much as everything I could with him. Not that you have any power, but within me. And I knew I had to, I said, I'm going to hang the phone. I'm going to hang up now because I need to ring 999. And I did a 999. They came in, they burst the door down, and they got him out and got him support, and he turned his life around. And as you can see, it does get me sometimes thinking back about that. And it does. Man. It can be very heavy doing this work, very heavy. And it does have its emotional toll, like we were talking at the beginning. I thought I used to. I thought I was tired coming home from work, doing the bricklaying side of things, but this is a different level.
The physical side,
yeah, it's a different level.
I was going to ask you about it anyway, Rob. To be honest, because of that and what we talked about pre-record, which was the fact that I've dipped my toes in this, like I'm at the starting blocks compared to where you are. But I'm still very much on the tools. I'm running my business, so I still get to put it down.
Yeah.
You know, I'm still fascinated by it. I'm still learning it, and I love the conversations I'm having with my guests. But tomorrow, I'm on site all day. You know, running my job. That my next recording is next Monday, actually. So I've got a week where I'm not recording. I'll be editing and doing all that kind of stuff, but the conversations can be quite heavy. I've had some really heavy conversations sat here, but I do get that time to put it down. You don't. You're fully immersed in like the mental health world and how you manage that and cope with it, because I doesn't say it's a concern, but I've thought about it myself as to if I ever, because my long-term, so I turned 40 a couple of weeks ago, and I'm very conscious of like my joints, my body, because the trade's hard fucking work, and I've got aches and pains and I've got a bad shoulder, bad knee and all that. And my plan B is like therapy, counselling, that kind of thing. But it does play on my mind where I think, what will it be like being in it all the time?
Supervision helps. Having a team around you helps. Setting really strict boundaries for yourself. I have strict boundaries, and I have to set strict boundaries for doing the talks, doing the social media stuff, and doing the day-to-day things. And come Friday, I'm all mental health out. Don't want to talk about it. Don't want to acknowledge it. Don't want to do it. And I have to do it to protect my own mental health. And as you seen a minute ago, sometimes it can still get me. We're all human at the end of the day, and we all have emotion. And I went through a stage, so May and June, I was very busy with work. I've had a lot going on at home in my private life, and I was struggling with that side of things. And I did a talk, or I did a few talks, and I was breaking down every single time I was doing the talk, because it's just raw emotion that's coming out of me. And for a long time, I used to ignore that. Like, if that had happened a couple of years ago, I would have swallowed that feeling of wanting to cry, and it would have sat in my face for the rest of the day. Whereas then I stopped to pause, I let it go, and it came out, and it was gone in seconds, as everybody's seen. Yeah. And it's learning to know and understand when to put it down and say no. If, like, I've had opportunities to do work over the past 3 weeks, and I've said no to people, not because I don't want to help support people, but I need to look after me. And that's one of my boundaries. I've turned all my notifications off on social media, and I don't answer messages in certain times of the day, because I need to look after me, and I have to put all these steps in so I can be there for the people that need me and support me, that need help and support off me. And it takes time, and it's definitely not easy, but it's learning to know right now is mental health time, and this time after work, 5 o'clock, for instance, is not mental health time. And it's learning to know and understand that. And then when we go and do the talks, I'll go onto site, I'll help, I'll support people. I will, if I feel like they're not going to ring the services, they're not going to ring the charity, I will refer them, so the team could contact them. And I'll move on to the next site, and I'm pretty much done with it. And like we were talking at the beginning, like when I first got here, some people can think that's quite cold. It's not that I don't care about that individual. It's not that I don't want them to get the help and support. But I've now come to the conclusion that, is conclusion the right word? But I've now come to a part with the work that I do now, that I've been to that site, I've spoke to that individual, I've helped them, supported them as much as I can, because, like we said, I'm not a professional at this. I'm not there to help them get better. I'm there to encourage them to reach out for help and support, and I can absolutely support them getting that support. But I've done as much as I can. So my little job within their journey is now done. Yeah. It's now moving on to something.
I can understand that completely.
Yeah.
Because for 2 things, I mean, one, love a metaphor, but you essentially are holding the door open for them, but they've got to walk through.
100%.
You can't drag them through. Because odds are, if you drag them through, the minute you leave, they run back out.
Yeah.
And then, as well as that, on a personal level, I mean, I don't know how many people you talk to on an average site, mate, or on an average week. But if you were to take on the emotional responsibility for each one of those people by the end of a week, it would just be overwhelming. You couldn't physically. You're one man.
Yeah.
And again, mate, there's massive thanks to you for the work you're doing in the industry, because it's fucking huge. And I couldn't even quantify the amount of ears that you all have reached, and the amount of...
It's off the talks. I mean, it's not just me. Although there's 8 of us that go out and do the talks, there's all the people in the background that do all the logistics side of it, and all the arranging side of it. So, but over the past 2.5 years, we've spoken to nearly 40,000 tradespeople.
That's incredible.
Across the country, up and down, we've covered every. There's not a part of the UK and Ireland that I don't think I've not been to. But it's it's not just myself. There's a big team out there. There's people like yourself that are now doing this work. There's band of builders that do work out there, and all that sort of stuff. There's people doing incredible work.
Much like you, mate, I'm still very much imposter syndrome. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just sat here having conversations. That's it.
But it's those little conversations, like you say, that just spark, that will make somebody can be. I think the biggest thing that when I set the podcast up 4 years ago nearly, the biggest thing for me is I wanted to give people hope and encourage people to do this, to let them know that I'm not an individual that's sat there doing that. Oh, maybe that's why I'm feeling like this. Oh, that's why this has happened to me. And this is why all these things are happening to me. And if they can get through it and they can work through it and they can come out the other side and they can still do the job, and it doesn't make them any weaker, it doesn't make them a certain type of person, so can I.
Yeah.
And that's ultimately what I wanted to do with people and all the work that I do. And that's why I put the stuff out that I do, and I am very vulnerable. And you know what, right? All the vulnerability that I've had. So I've just been with Ash Mahoney, and he was saying the abuse he got for some work they had put up. And he's a phenomenal bricklayer. It's really good work. His work's bang on all the time. But the abuse he gets in the messages and stuff like that, you know, all the stuff I put out and all the posts I put out, and obviously I don't get as much traction as those boys. But I've never had one person say to me, "You're weak. You're this, you're that." Yeah. I've broke down doing these talks. I was in Derby 6-8 weeks ago on a massive site. There was 480 people stood in front of me while I was delivering this talk, and I broke down crying doing the talk. And Andy, the lad who was out, was like, "Do you need me to take over?" I was like, "No, they can all stand and watch me do this because they need to see that this is real emotion. This is what happens to us in life." And, you know, after that, not one of them came up to me and said, "You're weak. You're no good. You're worthless." People coming up and giving me a hug, shaking my hand.
I mean, the thought of doing that, me personally, not the breaking down in front of people, but just the public talking is terrifying. You need balls of steel to do that, Rob. And massive fucking kudos to you for doing it. There is no weakness. You know that anyway. But there is no weakness. And I've had, not that I've done that kind of thing, but again, on the feedback, I haven't had a single bad comment on any of the clips that I've put out. And I've put clips out of people being very vulnerable. And nobody, in fact, none of my guests, I don't know how many, I think I'm up to 37, 38 episodes now, which is, I don't even know how that's happened. But nobody's had any bad feedback, not that I'm aware of. Everybody has said it's just been nothing but support. And the one thing that I've loved to see is like the domino effect of, because when I started this, I had no idea. In fact, I thought my biggest hurdle would be to get people sat where you are now. And I thought maybe I'll do one a month, or, you know, just managing to get people. But the domino effect of one person sitting there, and it might be that I'll get somebody to come in and they'll talk about anxiety. And off that episode, I might have 2 or 3 others message me and go, "I fancy coming, I've struggled with this." And I listened to that episode and really resonated. And I think people would benefit from my story. And to date, I think out of whatever it is, 37, 38 guests, I've only asked 2 to come in. Everybody else has reached out to me, which has just been phenomenal, which is one of the reasons I've put so many episodes out, because I haven't wanted to say no to anyone. So I'm like, look, if you're free, we'll do it, kind of thing. Because, again, I feel like it's a bit of a roller coaster. I don't know where it's going or where it'll end. So while it's rolling, I'm like, let's go, let's do it. It's one of the things I'm trying to embrace, is saying yes to things that make me uncomfortable. So, and this whole experience, this whole thing is one of those, or was one of those. But yeah, it's been really refreshing, I think, to see that, in fact, and I've said this a few times, but it's not that particularly men don't want to talk. The main problem is that we don't think anyone's listening. And once we realise there is, we want to talk. You know, men are talking, and you know, I've had so many people sit there, you know, big, hard men, you know, 6 foot plus, covered in tattoos, alpha males, talking about their emotions and how they've struggled with things. It don't make you weak. Like, if anything, it's the opposite, man. It makes you far stronger.
Makes you far stronger. Is it not a sign of strength that you can stand up and say, "Look, this is going on in my life, and I've got this going on, but I can still go out and paint those rooms, and I can still go out and lay those bricks, and I can still run big teams of people on construction sites. This is just one part of me."
Oh, Rob, mate, it takes so much strength, mate. I mean, me, like, recently, recent example myself. It was only 5-6 weeks ago. I lost my dog.
Yeah, sorry to hear about that.
Yeah, you'd have seen, and like I was devastated, mate.
Yeah,
I had
part
her
of the
since
family.
she was 12 years. Absolutely one of my kids, and also for me, she through some of the really rough times in my life, she was the one constant.
Yeah.
Like at times where my kids were, I'd going home to an empty home. My kids were gone. I was broken. The only thing waiting for me at home was my dog.
Yeah.
So she had been there through some really rough times. Losing her fucking broke me, mate. Really, really hit me hard. But like the day after we lost her, I'm at work. You're right, Mrs. Smith. How are you today? Did you do anything nice? You doing anything nice last night? And she's like, oh no, how was your evening? And I'm thinking it was one of the worst fucking days of my life. Yeah, not much, because I don't want to. It's my customer. I'm not going to say, oh yeah, I've just had to have my dog put to sleep. I'm fucking devastated and start crying in front of her. I had to. Maybe I didn't have to, but in fact, it was probably a protective thing for me because at that point, I was processing it. And in fact, it was a few things happened in one after the other. And that was the last thing in a line of things that had happened around that period. And I did a trade show in Bolton, and I was actually meant to be, I was shitting myself doing it. It wasn't the reason I pulled out, but I was meant to be doing 2 talks, or one on each day, about mental health to do with the trade decorator show. And I had to message Paula, the organizer, and say, look, this has happened, this has happened, this has happened. I can't do it. It's not that I don't want to do it, but I'm still piecing myself back together right now.
Yeah.
Like, I'm fucking broken. I'll come to the show, I'll meet people and do all that, but I can't stand there and talk about mental health because my own head is in so many pieces at the minute. And that was through that period in my life. And the other things that went on, I'd be happy to talk about, but it involves other people. So I won't put it out there live, and I'll tell you afterwards. But it was a real fucking rough time. But the thing that stood out to me, because I can remember almost standing outside my own body at that moment going, isn't this ironic? Like, you're fucking devastated, and yet you're there with this big beaming smile going, yeah, you're right. Like, oh, what was on telly last night? Like, and that's what we have to do. A lot of us in
it's that mask
the business
that you put on for society, whether it be stuff at work or whether it be even doing it in your own family, because you don't want to pass that load on to somebody.
And honestly, Rob, in an ideal world, I'd have gone, do you know what? I'm going to have a few days off. I'm just going to process everything that's happened, put myself back together, look after myself. But I couldn't because I'd got a job that ended Friday, and then another job that starts Monday. And if I'm late for that job, the butterfly effect, and I've got to make 6 phone calls going, I'm now this late and that late and that late, and I've got bills to pay and all the rest of it. I wasn't in a position to take any time off. I had to work through everything. And it was fucking rough, mate. It was rough. I spoke to a few people at the time, my own support network, but if I'm honest, I'm not the best at taking my own advice. So I'll tell people to talk. I'm not the best at talking myself. And again, that goes back to my childhood of the way that I grew up was very solitary in terms of looking after myself. So there's all stuff. It's constant work, mate. I'm working on myself all the time, trying to evolve.
How are you now?
Right now, better. I wouldn't say I'm great. But better. I've had a 4 weeks that have been okay. But yeah, I'm on the right path now. I was never at a point of crisis, but I was definitely fucking, life had thrown some big fucking haymakers at me. And yeah, I was reeling. I was on the ropes, as it were. I knew I wasn't going down, but yeah, it's I'm in the process of standing back up.
Good
that way.
I think crisis could mean so much for everybody. The crisis could be you could get home and your washing machine's broke. Because I think people think crisis is war. Crisis is the financial crisis, and crisis is Syria and the Gaza Strip and everything like that. But losing your dog, big part of your life. That's
massive, mate.
Personal crisis for you, and it's knowing and understanding how to deal with that. I think for me, a few years ago, I would have just ignored it, hoped it would have gone away. Oh well, life's done that. And I totally get it with the dogs.
Yeah.
I've always had dogs all the way through my life, and when I've lost them, it's like losing a member of the family, and it's devastating.
Yeah.
But a few years ago, I would have been just like, right, just get on with it.
Yeah.
You can't show emotion over this stuff. You just got to keep going. And I know we did speak before earlier on in the episode about you got to keep going. Absolutely, you got to keep going, but it's knowing how to do it in the right way. It's knowing how to, exactly like you said before, leaning in and understanding and feeling those emotions, but doing it in the right way for you.
It's hard, mate. I mean, anyone listening to this who's had a pet will understand it. I think the problem for me personally with losing the dog as well, she was the only dog. We haven't replaced her, and to be honest, my life now is very different to what it was when I first got her. So I don't feel I'm in a position to get another dog. Not that I want one, but it was everything that came along with her. Yes, I miss her incredibly, but like I still do it now. I mean, fuck me, we're like 6 weeks on or whatever. I still get home. I did it today. I walked in the house. I looked out the back window and went, "Oh, it's raining. I got to walk." Yeah. No, I ain't. 12 years worth of coming home and walking her, getting up and letting her in. The amount of times, mate, I go to unlock the back door, still now, and that's like, I don't know, man, your fucking heart breaks again. You know, just that little moment, you forget, and then it hits you. You know, you just get that little, and it's getting less kind of thing. It's whereas in the early days it would hit you and I'd be like 10, 15 minutes, like just fucking raw again. Now it might be 30 seconds. Yeah. You know, you go to open the door and I'm like, fucking, yeah. So it's I think the problem with losing a dog in particular, it's a routine. Yeah. You know, we were talking about identity earlier, similar. Like, my identity has changed again now. Like, as raw as it is, I'm now not a dog owner, so I now don't have to do the walks. I don't have to. And if I'm honest, again, that's probably a part of my life that I need to give myself something back there, because that was me time. The dog walks, and she was a husky, so it was a big walk. Yeah. It was an hour a day, every day. Longer at weekends, you know, we'd go on really big walks. I haven't replaced that. I probably filled it with work, if I'm honest. And I was talking to my wife actually the other day, and I said to her, I need to start doing more stuff for me, because I'm not doing anything for me right now. And it started yesterday, actually. Stupid as it sounds, I went to watch the football on my own. I was like, I'm going to walk down to the pub and go and watch the Liverpool game. 2 hours, giving it to myself to go and do that.
So important to do stuff like that. So important to give back to yourself, because we always make time to fit that extra job in. Somebody rings you up. Yeah. Like, there's so many people that I speak to and say, right, I want you to make time for you. I ain't got time. All right, can you come and whatever the trade are? I've got this problem. Oh, can you sort this out? Yeah, I can come and do that. I'm like, I thought you had no time.
Yeah.
And it's those routines, and dogs are more than just dogs. It's the part of life. And she was with you in such an important part of your time, and she helped in time of your life, and she helped you through that period. So you're mourning more than a dog.
Oh, massively, mate. Yeah, massively. It's been tough, mate. I get emotional thinking about it now. But it's one of those, nothing I can do. You know, it's I'm still processing it. Yeah. You know, and people have asked me, how are you feeling? Like, processing, just working it out. That's it. That's all I can do, really, you know. And I guess it's like bereavement, isn't it? It sits there, just gets a little bit less. Yeah. And as I said to you before, now when the brain like fucking does me over, now it might take me 10 seconds, 30 seconds to snap back out of it. It used to be 10 minutes. So it's just that progressive thing. And I've gone through a whole journey myself, mate. The biggest bereavement I ever had was the first big bereavement, I should say. I was 24, 25, lost my granddad. My granddad was like my dad. So he raised me. I won't go into my family history at this point in the podcast, but my grandfather was like a father figure. started the business, and me and him were tight, like incredible person. Lost him to lung cancer. The whole process, he went from fighting fit to passing away within 12 weeks. And he was, when I say he was fit, he was 70, but he looked 60. He used to ride his bike 30 miles, a day, 3 times a week sort of thing, like very, very fit. And just very sudden in and out, gone. And the way that I dealt with that then, I would not speak about him. I would not talk to anyone about it. Completely suppressed it. And again, I think I had maybe 3-4 days off work at the time. I was working as a bailiff at the time. And the only reason I took time off is because I thought, if I react wrongly in a high pressure situation. So I took a few days off work and then got back. And it wasn't until I got into the relationship I'm now in with my wife where she kept poking at me over it. And I was like, yeah, that happened, but I don't want to talk about it. Well, why don't you want to talk about it? I'm like, I fucking don't want to talk about it. I'm like, I've just told you I don't want to talk about it. Like, leave it. And she peeled the layers back on me, to be honest. I'm grateful she did now, but the old me, talking about like what happened when I wouldn't have spoke about it, mate. It'd just been
I think it's a big thing. Like so when your wife was picking at the scab, was it turning to anger?
Initially, yeah, because it was like, leave me the fuck alone. Why do you? I've told you I don't want to speak. But yeah, it was a gradual. Fucking hell, in credit to her, mate. She probably gave me therapy over 2 years over that. And I'm now at the point where I can talk about him, and the thing that I've realised is I now focus on the positives, all the amazing experiences and memories that I've got with him, because I'd suppressed all that as well. Not just the fact of him passing, I had suppressed all the good memories and all the things that shaped me into the man that I am today, which he did. I'd shut all that away, and that was in the hurt locker. You know what I mean? That was too painful to open that door. Whereas now I can sit with that. I can sit with the positives. I can,
because you have the understanding. And I think it's a big point that people, when they're at that point and they don't want to talk about it, they'll turn it into anger and just push it down and suppress it and don't want to talk about it. But there's only so much you can suppress, and there's only so much you can push down till you explode. Yeah,
definitely, mate. And it comes out in different people in different ways, doesn't it? I mean, as I said to you before, I think part of it with me was borderline self-harm by putting myself in dodgy situations, to be honest. It's all I can really link the two up.
I know a couple of people that played rugby at a really good level, and they said to me they used to use the games over the weekend to hurt themselves for exactly that reason, because they had so much going on in their life. They chose a violent sport. Well, it's not violent, it's a high contact sport, because they could then go out, get hit, and then come back and hit even harder and take their frustration out on other people that way. And there was one guy that I've spoke to, and he was like, he used to go out, get drunk, purposely start fights and want to get beat up.
Really?
He says, I remember going over to people and kicking off with the bouncers or kicking off with whoever. I'm like thinking in my mind, punch me as hard as you can. Please punch me as hard as you can.
Wow.
And again, it's that self-harm side of things. It's just powerful where the mind can take you.
It really is, mate. Yeah, it really is. There's so many examples, and we could talk about it all night, to be fair, because it does fascinate me, the whole thing. And I guess the key, the summary for me is just awareness. Once I began to understand a little bit about psychology and the mind and triggers, it's almost like, the Matrix. You take the red pill, the blue pill thing. Once you've took it, you can't look back. And because I used to be very intolerant of people as well. I wasn't overly aggressive, but zero tolerance. Like I say, I wasn't aggressive, but in my younger year, to 20s, I got into a lot of fights. Whereas now I found myself, I could be in similar situations where people would do things that in days gone by would have brought out anger in me. I'll now look at them and think, I wonder what he's gone through.
Yeah. That's a massive thing, that.
Yeah.
Like, I used to be on site all the time and people would be screaming and shouting at me, and I'm like, I know this is a stressful situation and I know something's gone wrong, but what's causing you to get like this?
Yeah.
Why are you like this?
If somebody flies off the handle, yeah, absolutely. It's not just, I'm going to fight anger with anger here. Now it is that step back and,
And if you match their energy level, it's just going to explode. And that's what. But that comes with time, knowledge, experience, doesn't it? That, you need to take that step back, and it's exactly the same in your life. You need to take that step back sometimes and think, right, okay, this is going on in my life. I haven't caused it, or I might have caused it. But how do I work through this, and what do I need to do for me? Because I think it's really important to be selfish sometimes, and it's not selfish to be selfish. And again, it comes back to like how you said to me, how do you cope doing this work? Well, I'm selfish for myself. I put my own needs first, and I try and do it in the most leveled way I can. But it's learning to say no to people without just going no. Like, if I think a lot of people struggle with being overwhelmed with the amount of work they have, but they don't want to say no, because I think in construction you've got to make hay while the sun shines, but you can also or you can spread yourself too thin. But it's better to turn around to people and say, absolutely, I want to do this, but I haven't got the capacity to do it at the minute. I can do it X amount of time. Does that work for you? Yes. Okay, great. No. Okay, sorry, but please, can you remember me for future work?
Yeah.
And I have to be like that with myself. I have to be selfish and put myself in. Like, I've started cycling again. I used to do loads and loads of cycling, and then for 10 years maybe I totally and utterly dropped off my radar because I thought I didn't have time for it. But what I didn't realize is that cycling helped me. Not only does it keep me fit, and it means I can eat a bit more and I can drink a bit more, but it was time for me. And I didn't have to deal with anybody. I didn't have to deal with anybody's emotion. I didn't have to make a decision, because I used to make a lot of decisions at work all day, and I used to come home and, what do you want for tea? Well, you can't make your mind up what you want for tea. I've been making decisions all day, and I'd be like that sometimes. And it just allows you to zone out, come back down to your baseline, and then you can you can deal with whatever gets chucked at you then. Because again, it goes back to like that analogy of what you said before. It's like, oh, these little things keep happening to me all the time. If you're in a good space and you are calm, you can chip away at all those little things.
It's so important that you do that, though, because the alternative is what? Like, you've got Rob that knows his boundaries and looks after himself, and like you said, being selfish, it's not. It's sort of self-preserving is what it is. Because the alternative to that is you hit burnout and you say, I can't do this anymore, and you walk away. And then you never, you stop what you're doing and you don't help anyone. Whereas if you know your boundaries, you can keep doing this and keep helping people, which is what you're doing, mate. So, out of interest, what's what are your sort of, where do you see the MYH podcast going? Have you got any?
To be honest with you, I don't really know. I don't have a plan. I don't have a business plan for it. I only put one episode out a month, and that's always been a conscious decision on my part, because, well, when I very first started it, I was still working full time, and I didn't. And I wanted to put it out for people to listen to at the leisure, and didn't want them to think, oh, I need to catch up or anything like that. But the beauty of podcasts is they're there all the time, and people can catch up with them. And a lot of people say to me, what's my plan? And my honest answer is I haven't got anything written down. I just go with the flow. And I think because for 20 years of working at a tier 1 contracting level, that my life was so regimented, and I had to have plans, and everything had to be, again, because I felt so petrified that I was going to do something wrong at work, I had to have everything planned and everything sorted and everything like that. What I didn't want to do doing this work is find myself slipping back into that habit. And I really do just go with the flow with it. I try and get an episode out every single month. I don't think I did one every single month for 3 years solid. And last year I've taken a step back from it, worked on myself. I'm now coming back. I've released 3 episodes this year, I think. I've got another one about to come out. And I'm literally just doing what works best for me.
That's cool, man. So interesting what you said there about catching up. So I've got this vision in my head when it comes to the episodes I'm doing, because I've done some quite niche episodes. The one that I always use as an example, I did an episode that was purely about the menopause, and I did that episode knowing that a lot of people are going to read the title and go, no. But also knowing that there'll be a few people out there. Because just to background that one, the menopause episode, the way I saw that was one of the biggest sort of like a big factor in men that take their own life is relationship breakdowns, and a big factor in relationship breakdowns between the age of 40 and 55 is the onset of the menopause.
Yeah.
So I kind of figured that if I could explain the menopause to us men, because, mate, I learned so much. I knew nothing, sat there, that it could potentially help some bloke somewhere who's going, actually, my missus is acting a bit different. I'll listen to that. And it's that thing of I'm not looking for 10,000 downloads. I'm looking for one meaningful download.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I see it in my mind as like a metaphorical bookcase.
Yeah.
You know, here's an episode on this. Here's an episode on that.
That's a really good way.
And I just put it all out there. So it's like people can go back and look and go, oh, well, actually, I've got this going on in my life now. I remember there was an episode, or I can even look and check. I wonder if he's done an episode on this.
Yeah.
I did an episode a couple of weeks ago with Danny, painter and decorator, who had suffered really badly with ulcerative colitis, went through surgery and having like a colostomy and all that kind of stuff. And those kind of episodes, again, I know that they're not like generalized, so people are potentially go, oh, I don't want to listen to that, but somebody does.
Yeah.
And that's how I see it. It's like just a library resource that once they're out there forever. But
and that's exactly it. And people can pick and choose that as and when.
100%, mate. Yeah, not everyone's going to be for everyone, but hopefully it's just building this library of resources for people that, if and as and when, that they can refer back to some of the more specialised episodes, I guess.
Keep you up, 'cause you're doing a good job, mate.
I appreciate that, mate. Again,
Absolutely.
It means a lot coming from you, Rob. I think we've reached a pretty good place, haven't we?
I think so, yeah.
Is there anything else that you wanted to say before we wrap things up?
No, other than that, if you do feel like you need a bit of help and support, absolutely reach out and get that, because there's people out there that are willing to listen to you. You're not alone in anything you're going through. It does always get better. I promise you, it always gets better. You might not feel it and you might not think it, but if you put a bit of work in and listen to the help and support that's out there, it will get better, I promise you.
Well said, mate. I think I can't say anything better than that. So on that point, thank you very much for listening, and catch you on the next one.
Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Mate, it's been an absolute pleasure. Absolute pleasure.